It is Monday, October 24th. Hurricane Wilma now upon us.
From the Time Warner Center in New York, this is Daybreak with Carol Costello and Chad Myers.
And good morning to you. CNN is your hurricane headquarters, and we want to go right to the severe weather expert, Chad Myers, to begin our coverage this hour. Tell us where it is now, Chad.
Carol, this is like old times, huh?
I know. How long have you been here? I mean, how long have you been overnight working?
That's a long time. Since sometime yesterday. I think maybe since Wednesday. Here's the center of the storm. Here's Naples. Here's Florida Bay right on down into northern Monroe County. There's Key West getting hit so very hard right now with wind speeds must be in excess of 90 miles per hour. In fact, we don't even know because the instruments have been knocked out for all of the keys at this point, but another very heavy band right over Key West. And then you get farther to the north, the winds are actually onshore. Could be some flooding in some of the canals around Key Largo, or even for that matter, even up to about Fort Lauderdale could be seeing some flooding. And then here you go. The red counties here, tornado warnings. I have central Osceola County, and that's for St. Cloud. And this one you see here, this is for Lake Wales. You can see Lake Wales here. I'm assuming it's on this storm here. Both of those are actually moving a little bit toward the northwest, about 15 miles per hour. This looks like an ugly part of the storm right there, maybe over St. Cloud in a half an hour. Carol, we'll have more, but we have so many live shots we all want to get to. I don't want to take too much time.
Oh, do we ever? As you all know, Gary Tuckman has been in Key West where it's raining really hard, and they have sustained winds of about 75 miles per hour. So let's head there live once again to check in with Gary, standing out in the elements. Hey, Gary.
Carol, good morning to you, and let's summarize what's happening in Key West, Florida, the southernmost point in the continental United States. What we're dealing with here is this, flooding in parts of the town. However, no major flooding just yet. At least one injury. A woman a short time ago was brought to this hotel we're standing next to because there are no hospitals open in the Keys. A tree fell on her house. She will be okay. She came in this hotel under her own power with the fire officials. That gives you an idea of the kind of risks you take when you don't evacuate. 28,000 people live in Key West, Florida. Most of them, according to Monroe County authorities, did not evacuate this town. They decided either it was too far to go to the shelter, because the fact is the nearest shelter is 150 miles away in Miami-Dade County. There are no shelters in the Keys because it's not considered safe. And another fact is Key West has not been directly hit by a hurricane, a major hurricane, since 1919. That's been 86 years. So generations of people have grown up with not seeing a major hurricane. And a lot of people say, hey, we've never left before. We weren't planning on leaving again, and they didn't leave. Mandatory evacuation was in effect yesterday. A curfew is in effect now. Nevertheless, we still see people wandering around. I just heard some wood breaks. I was just looking up there. There's a building right over here. You can see it's a very well-constructed building. It's the Express Store. It's hard for you to see. There's a balcony up there, and we heard just a crack on the balcony there. Over here, there are lights above these stores. These lights have been swinging for a long time. Hurricane-force winds for an hour and a half, and the lights haven't come down. We're marveling right now, Carol, at the fact that during Hurricane Katrina and Rita, before the winds picked up even this much, we saw a lot of destruction with some of the stores and restaurants nearby. So far here in Duval Street here in downtown Key West, not a lot of destruction. And according to the fire officials, they haven't seen a lot yet, but we know at least one tree came down on one house, and it ain't over yet.
No, you're right about that. The full brunt of the storm hasn't hit yet. A question for you about the 80% of residents who chose to stay in Key West. I would have thought that they would have been watching television and watching what happened in light of Katrina, but obviously they didn't. I mean, that didn't make any of them leave.
What was really funny, Carol, because I think we talked about this during Rita. I was in Beaumont, Texas, and Port Arthur, Texas during Rita, and we couldn't find anybody on the streets, anybody in their houses. It was like a 95 to 99% evacuation rate. It was incredible, and we attributed a lot of it to what happened during Hurricane Katrina. So we thought that would kind of be the legacy of what happened during Katrina, the horror and the tragedy, that people would remember that it pays to evacuate. And indeed, and you'll talk to my colleagues up the coast here, there's been some good evacuation percentages in Marco Island and in Naples and in Fort Myers. But here in Key West, where you have kind of a attitude of live and let live, a lot of people have decided they want to live here and not go to the shelter.
All right, we'll get back to you. Gary Tuckman reporting live from Key West this morning. Let's head to the other side of the storm on the northern end to Naples, Florida. That's where Jean Meserve is watching, Wilma. Good morning, Jean.
Hi, Carol. Boy, we're finally starting to get a touch of what Gary Tuckman has been experiencing down there in Key West. The winds here now really hammering us, and the rain hitting my hood here so hard that I'm having difficulty hearing any of the program. It's really quite something. You'll notice that the winds are blowing in this direction. That's probably a good thing. Behind me is a channel or an inlet in from the Gulf into the middle of this condominium project here. And the winds are blowing back towards the Gulf, and so it's sweeping water out of here rather than bringing water in. Of course, what they've been really worried about here is the storm surge. These winds would appear to minimize that impact here. The storm, of course, tracking is south of here. It didn't look like Naples was going to be too badly hit by the storm surge, but this just another big plus, driving hopefully some of that water right offshore. I know Gary's been talking a little bit about the Katrina effect. I will say that I spoke to a number of people in the course of the week who said that they were evacuating because they saw what Katrina had done to the Gulf. They didn't want to have any experience like that, so they were going to get out of harm's way, and they did. But, you know, I talked to many other people, Carol, who said this is a totally different situation. New Orleans is below sea level. It was surrounded by those levees. When they gave away, it was bowl that filled up. Here, we're right on the coast. Whatever water comes in is going to go out. And so people were deciding they were going to hunker down, and they just wouldn't see any comparison between that situation and that storm and this one. Carol, back to you.
Okay, Jean, I'm going to take a chance that you can hear me. I just wonder, you described somewhat where you're standing. What are you being protected by?
I'm sorry, I think I'm having trouble hearing that question, Carol. I believe I heard you say, what am I being protected by? Is that right?
Yes.
Not much. I'll tell you, we've got a big building right in front of us, but the wind is sweeping down this way. There are some buildings in the distance, but not too many. I'm out in the thick of it right now.
Okay, stay there. We're going to talk really loudly so you can continue to hear us. I'm going to bring Chad in right now.
I have my Doppler set up here for Naples, where she is right there, Naples Park, and we'll just circle the whole area. Carol, there's an awful lot of weather still to come for her. We'll let it into motion and show that there's the weather here now, almost the eastern eye wall, and that will slowly go out a little bit farther. There you go. There is the eastern eye wall coming into her area right there, and that's going to be increasing the wind speed probably by a factor of 2. What she's seeing now about 40. When that eye wall comes in, it may go actually to 80 or 90 miles per hour. So, Jean, I need you to be careful out there. Got that?
I don't think she can hear us anymore.
When it gets to be a roar out there when the wind starts banging on you like that.
Oh, and it's blowing right into her ear, so we can understand that. I wanted to ask you a question about this bowl effect. People didn't evacuate Florida because, you know, they figured, you know, no lessons learned from New Orleans because New Orleans is in a whole different situation, you know, with the being in a bowl and being below sea level, but it's still pretty dangerous, isn't it? Oh,
it's still very low, and we had pictures earlier, Carol. I mean, literally like 10 o'clock when water was already coming over the seawall there, right along Roosevelt Boulevard, the southernmost point in Key West, and all of this weather has just been pouring on up with the winds smashing onto all of those east-west keys from Big Pine Key to Marathon and right on down to Key West. And you know, I love Key West, but I've looked at some of those buildings, and they're not built all that well in some spots. They're just rickety old wooden buildings that haven't been hit by a hurricane in 80 years. So, you know, we're going to see more damage, I think, than people expected.
Plus, there's only one bridge out of there.
Well, sure. You have to go across the 7-mile bridge, which is 7 miles, and then go all the way north through to Key Largo, up to either Cardson Road, and then go to the 18-mile stretch, which is another stretch of a highway. But people know and realize that sometimes you can sit on that highway for 8 hours trying to go 100 miles, and they just didn't want to deal with it, I guess.
All right.
There are no shelters in the Keys. If you wanted to go to shelter, you had to get off the Keys and go to the mainland part of Florida, and that's why people didn't want to drive that far.
Okay, let's talk about Florida's barrier islands now. They may be in most danger from expected storm surges. CNN Chief National Correspondent John King is on Marco Island. He joins us live there from now. Hey, John.
Morning, Carol. It's getting a bit breezy out here now, you might notice. We've got significant damage, some trees beginning to happen, and we've had some power outages in the last few minutes. Our hotel just went out, and down the island we have had power going out all night long. We've been wondering when it would go. Officials said they thought it would go once the hurricane got close. We're at tropical storm speed with these winds now, is my guess, but they are intensifying still, and the wind and the rain, as you can hear. And for the first time, Marco Island is black, except for some emergency lights on top of the buildings to my left, up the beach to my right as well. We're running obviously off our satellite truck and our generators, but we got a few flashes about 15 or 20 minutes ago, and just in the has gone out, at least on this side of the island, as far as I can see. Carol, that is one of the concerns. Obviously, the storm surge is the biggest concern. They expect a storm surge of 7 to 9 feet. Obviously, still a couple hours away, but this was their big worry for the about 2,000 people still on this island, that the power would go out, the utilities would go out, and then you would have the storm surge in the early morning hours. We expect it'll be daylight, just daylight, but certainly.
Stand by.
All right, we've lost John King. We expected we would because of the wind blowing there, and he's really standing in an area where there's not much protection from the wind, and I'm sure his crew isn't far away. Can we go back to the double box, the pictures? Actually, we can go back to John King. John, can you hear us again? John? Nah, he cannot hear us, but John King is standing in the barrier islands of Florida. And in the upper right-hand corner is a picture of Key Largo. You can see it's basically wind blowing there right now. The Isle of Murata, halfway down, oh no, we don't have that anymore. We see a graphic and where Hurricane Wilma is standing right now. All right, coming up in just a few minutes, we'll talk with one longtime resident of Marco Island who's decided to stay put and ride out this storm. We'll be right back. Wilma is approaching. You're about to see a picture of Marco Island, the barrier islands of Florida. You can see the rain is going sideways now, a good indication that, you know, there is a hurricane out there in the Atlantic Ocean. I want to quickly update you now on what we know about Hurricane Wilma at this hour. The storm is a major Category 3 hurricane. Sustained winds are around 120 miles per hour. Landfall is expected between 6 and 7 a.m. Eastern time, and that's, of course, just a couple hours from now. Some of the stronger winds already battering coastal areas of Florida. The storm's wind speeds picked up within the past hour, and we expect the back end of the storm to completely pass the east coast of Florida and head into the Atlantic by late today. But let's talk to the expert, shall we? Good morning, Chad.
Good morning, Carol. I want to show you what I think is the biggest danger of the storm itself. Yes, Key West is getting hit hard. Maybe, what, 8,000, 10,000, 20,000 people maybe left on that island, depends. But now I do know that the east coast of Florida really did not evacuate with this storm. Here is the northern part of the hardest part of this southern eye wall, right here on the eye itself. It is going to actually pass north of Key West, not make direct contact with the island of Key West or with that key. But what's going to happen is I flatten you out and show you the direction of this storm. This part, this most dangerous forward part, the right side of the eye wall that we always warn you about, will be moving on up toward Miami, and in fact right on up even into Fort Lauderdale, and we're going to call a more significant landfall along the big cities here. This is just completely now filled in with million-dollar residences, condos, high-rises, and everything you could possibly imagine. What used to be one city and then a break, another city, is now completely filled in. This southern part of, obviously, Florida is where everybody wants to retire. Well, now this is where the damage is going to occur as the storm passes into the Atlantic Ocean and then finally out to sea. So I am concerned about everybody here not expecting a Category 3 storm at 120 miles per hour and those winds coming in from the west. Whenever you build a big high-rise, you put everything on the East Coast with the big windows and the storm shutters because you expect the storm to come from the Atlantic. This one's coming from the wrong way.
Oh,
Carol.
And just to reiterate, Chad, what a Category 3 storm could do, because you said it could pack winds of, what, 120 miles per hour?
It is 120 right now,
120,
yes.
okay. Strong enough to damage mobile homes, of course, and hopefully everyone who lives in a mobile home is out of there by now.
We talked to a guy, the mayor of Everglades City, about 4 or 5 hours ago. That city at sea level, expecting a storm surge between 8 and 12 feet, which means every building is going to be underwater. And there were still 20 people left in that city that didn't evacuate.
We're actually going to talk to that man again next hour.
Excellent.
But the winds are strong enough to peel shingles from roofs, crumble pool cages, uproot newly planted shrubs and trees, and of course power failures are likely. And of course the electricity has gone out in many cities throughout Florida this morning. So it's nothing to fool around with.
Absolutely not. Not when it comes, that's why they call a Category 3, Carol, a major hurricane. That gets up to that major category.
You know, it's funny what happens, though. And I remember when I was in New Orleans and Rita was coming, and it was a Category 4, and we were all going, oh, thank goodness it's not a Category 5. Not really realizing that a Category 4 is really bad.
It certainly is, and it was a Cat 5, and people went, oh, it's getting smaller, it's not going to be as bad. If this was just a tropical storm 3 days ago and we said it's going to be a Category 3, everybody would have been much more prepared than I think something that was going the other direction, getting weaker rather than getting stronger. And there you go, 120 miles per hour right now.
Okay. What's it doing in Fort Myers? Rob Marciano is there, so what is he feeling, Chad?
He's feeling winds that are actually offshore, not the onshore surge, but he's also feeling winds that are going to pick up to probably 60 or 70. I know he's on the easy side or the clean side of the eye, but this is still going to be pretty bad for him.
Okay, so let's take a look. Rob, can you hear us?
I hear you, Carol. Offshore, or in this case, in my face. The rain has been coming down and blowing this way, as Chad mentioned, offshore. We are on Fort Myers Beach, which is southwest of Fort Myers by about 15 miles. It actually faces the southwest. So we've got winds coming easterly and blowing pretty much the surf that is trying to roll in here. The tide is trying to come up and peak out, but these winds keep battering and blowing these waves and all that water back out to sea. And this direction of the wind should keep up likely until this storm makes landfall down to our south. I heard John King talk about the lights on Marco Island and how they're starting to go out as far as power is concerned. Up and down the beach here in Fort Myers Beach, there are a few lights. I think the power's on in most spots, but many of the business owners here have shut down their power before they left in order to preserve a little bit of that, just one more safety measure in the event that things get hairy here and power starts to go out. How fast have the winds been going? Well, they've been sustained around 30 miles an hour. We've seen wind gusts certainly up and over 40 miles an hour at times, but much more than that, I don't think so. I don't think we've reached the 50-mile-an-hour mark. There hasn't been a whole lot of debris flying down the beach or coming off buildings or coming off palm trees. This is kind of a pseudo barrier island. You go farther up the coast along Lee County, you've got several other beautiful barrier islands like Sanibel Island, Captiva Island, Bonita Beach is another one, and a couple of little small keys in between there. Those are all under mandatory evacuations, and with the bridges that go to and from those barrier islands, they shut down when you hit tropical storm force winds, so those bridges are likely already shut down tonight. That's the latest from Fort Myers Beach, Carol. Back over to you.
Well, don't go away just yet. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. I guess hundreds of people were gathering on the piers there, and they were body surfing and surfing and in these major waves that were coming in Sunday. So how quickly did it turn, Rob?
Oh, it's been fairly gradual throughout the day today. Actually, throughout much of the day today, people were still hanging out on the beach, just like you said. They were body surfing. They were surfing, which is not something that happens typically on this side of the Gulf. So anytime there's a storm out there, the hardcore surfers who don't get many swells here certainly hit the beach. But the rain started coming in squalls starting around 5, 6 o'clock tonight, and then became steady around 9 o'clock. And since then, it's been a pretty good swath of rain and wind at times, and most everybody we haven't seen much of anybody. A couple of security guards that are hired to stay around this area so that, in the event that, there may be some looting, we haven't seen any of that, but there are a few. The only people really that we've seen are security guards that are hired by the businesses here to keep their eyes on things while the storm comes on shore. So most of the people here on Fort Myers Beach have got up and got out of here, and the people that were hanging out on Fort Myers Beach earlier today are gone either inland or to wherever they live elsewhere. So just us out here. But the good news is, Carol, that water is not going to come up anywhere closer to where I'm standing. So storm surge is not going to be an issue. But as winds, as Chad has said, keep kicking up, and that at some point they could gust to hurricane strength. That's going to do some damage and likely bring down some power lines. So it'll be somewhat tough living here in Fort Myers and Fort Myers Beach for the next couple of days. That's for sure.
But it seems like they're going to dodge the major bullet. In fact, on a 7-Eleven store there, an employee, spray painted the boards covering the windows, and the spray paint said, "Wilma, yabba dabba don't." So maybe it listened. Rob Marciano live in...
I lost my earpiece,
That's
Carol.
okay, no problem.
Your sweet voice went to dial tone. I'm sorry.
No problem, Rob. We'll get back to you. Much more to come this morning. Hurricane Wilma heading toward the coast of the west coast of Florida. We'll bring you the latest all morning long. You're watching Daybreak for Monday, October 24th.